Yeah.
A few of them, yeah.
Yeah. This is such a cool moment for me. It was almost a year ago at your house.
We were just trying to figure that out on the way in the car.
7 hours at your house.
Yeah.
And just one of the most powerful shows we've ever done. Like more downloads, more attention than anything, Paul. So
cool.
Thank you for being back, man. This is one of my favorite things in the world. To just have real conversations.
You know, I've been having more fun since I started my podcast than I have in a long time.
Yeah.
I really do better in that medium. You know, I don't know how many of my podcasts you've listened to, but I usually go 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, multiple.
I want to really talk to people and get into stuff. I don't want the edutainment, fluffy stuff. You know, the feedback I'm getting from people is very moving to them, and like, oh my God, I really feel like I know that person now. And it's so funny because I've had my own instructors listen to podcasts with other instructors and go, oh wow, I feel like I know Nicole or Matthew or whoever so much better now, or Warren, you know.
Yep.
And I'm like, yes, that's what it's for. And I, you know, like my podcast with Sherry Tenpenny on vaccinations was a ball buster. You know, it made headline news 5 times now, 2 times in England and 3 times in Australia.
What'd they say?
Paul Chek's a dangerous person that's spreading stuff about anti-vaccination, but it was because a famous chef who I did a podcast with him on his show in Australia, Pete Evans. He's kind of like the Jamie Oliver of Australia.
Is he otherwise known as the paleo chef?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, Pete Evans.
Yeah.
He's talented.
Yes.
Yep.
And so he interviewed me, and he really liked my podcast with Sherry Tenpenny, so he put it out on his like forum, one of his forums, like Twitter or something like that, and he's got, you know, like 1 million followers, over 1 million followers.
Yeah.
And so it went viral, and then the next thing you know, the media picked it up, and because he's so famous, they started attacking him for promoting my podcast. But within minutes of those headlines popping up, my downloads went up like crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, baby.
Well, and there's no bad media. Like, controversy sells. And so I've always, for 30 plus years, man, I've known you. You've been putting out in the wellness industry quality information. And sometimes in order to meet people where they are, we got to use controversy.
Oh, of course.
Do you find that your videos on YouTube, the more controversial you make the headlines, the more downloads, the more attention, the more healing you're going to produce?
Yeah. You know, conflict is an important part of human relationship. I mean, if you don't have conflict, can you ever really get to know somebody?
Amen.
And if we don't discuss issues that highlight where there's polarization, then we never really have an opportunity to learn how to transform sex and violence love to conditional love to empathetic and compassionate love, because those are all aspects of the creative process. If you want to create something, look, if you want to build a more beautiful apartment than this, you're going to have to tear this one down. If you want to build a new house, you're going to have to cut the trees down and get a bulldozer out to make you a driveway and a place for your foundation. And unfortunately, that means lots of birds, bees, and deer and raccoons lose their home.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, that's well described in the Hindu trinity of Brahma, the creator god, Vishnu, the maintainer, and Shiva, the great destroyer, but it's the transformer, right? If you don't... People always go into chaos whenever any of their ideas are challenged, because in order to embody a new concept, you have to let go of the old one that is somehow a limiting way of relating relative to the new concept. So there's always a kind of a chaos, right? Imagine, you know, if you think God's going to burn you in hell and you've been programmed to believe that all your life, and all of a sudden you find yourself really suffering from that belief, and you meet someone like me that teaches you a much broader concept of God, even though you're nodding your head listening to a guy like me and it makes complete sense. Well, the next time you have the urge to touch your genitals or have sex with someone you're not married to, there's that chaos because the child has been raised to believe that. So you've got your whole lifetime of believing in this God that'll burn in hell, but now you've got this new concept to work with, but it comes face to face with very established neural networks and belief and behavior patterns. And that's really why spiritual growth is something that's a lot more talked about than actually engaged in, because to grow spiritually, you have to be, first of all, anytime you engage in a spiritual growth process, it's death to the ego, because the more you grow spiritually, the more porous the ego gets to the wants, feelings, needs of other people, the importance of nature. In other words, your concept of self expands very greatly. But the ego is really inherently trying to control and create the illusion of safety and convince itself that it knows what the outcome is going to be of this investment, or if I leave right now, I'm going to show up to this meeting on time, but it forgets about this thing called traffic and accidents and weather. So all of a sudden it's going to be 5 minutes late and the ego's just freaking out. But the process of spiritual growth and development is one that says, well, you hit traffic and everyone else does too, and you text somebody a message and say, hey, I'm stuck, there's a car accident on the side of the road, I'll be there as quick as I can. But someone who hasn't reached that point of relaxation of the need to control,
yes, like a spiritual maturity,
shows up at the meeting and they're sweaty and they got cold hands and they're nervous that now maybe they've done something wrong, and the mind just goes bananas doing all that stuff. So there's the chaos that we have to go through and the conflict that we often generate within ourselves that is a necessary part of the change process. And that's why I say you have to have spiritual courage to really grow spiritually, because if you really want to take guidance from your soul, you have to be ready to realize that many of the things that you're asking for guidance on, your ego has some kind of an addiction to or an investment in, and your soul might trick you, not trick you to trick you, but your soul might trick you because you might find that your soul has a much broader sense of right and wrong than your ego ever could conceive of.
Do you feel like the soul always knows, though? And obviously we're connected to many lives. I mean, you wrote an email to me actually when I was in Thailand, and it was about your son, Mana, who used to be a woman in Thailand. Tell me this story. Like, I was in Thailand reading this email from you, just thinking, is Paul actually telling me a legitimate story that came to him in a ceremony? Like, when did this message come through that your son was a woman in Thailand in a past life?
This is a bit of a story, and there's some interesting caveats to it. Well, first of all, when Angie and I first got together, I was 50, and we went through quite a period together where there was a lot of intense, intimate experiences. And in this falling in love process, she had never had the desire to have children before, but all of a sudden she found herself really wanting children, and I was very clear that I didn't want children. I'm like, I already have a son. Paul Jr. will be 40 in September, so I've kind of been on the daddy train for a while.
Yeah.
And I know how much is involved in it, and I really had become exhausted by the time I was 50 of constantly engaging so many people and the pressure of running a big business and just.
Well, the Institute is a child in itself.
It is. It's a large family, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people to deal with. And at one time I had 20 or 21 instructors traveling around the world, and I think we had 20 staff at the Institute, and I had a big overhead. I mean, I was just under a lot of pressure, and I'd reached the point where I needed to do something just for me. I was tired of trying to save the world, so to speak. And so right when Angie and I got together was when I was right in the throes of a midlife crisis, which really kind of came on with gangbusters at my 50th birthday. It's like I was just at the end of my rope with many things, and I'd felt like I'd created a monster that was now consuming me in the name of health. And I'm like, oh my God, I've created the most painful existence for myself, devoting myself to keeping everyone in the world healthy, like, what I teach.
And your health was suffering.
Well, it's just, I'd lived on airplanes for 20 years, and, we're a worldwide organization. Penny and I were making it around the world twice a year, every year for many, many years. And sometimes one time I did 47 lectures in 6 countries in 6 weeks. And mine are not just walk in for an hour. Some of these things are like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-day courses, right? So point being is, by the time I met Angie, I just had no desire to be a father again. And I said to her, I said, if you really want children, then I will maintain our relationship with you while you look for another man that can serve that role for you. And I said, we can still be friends and still share intimacy and our love, but I can't support being a daddy again because I don't have it in me. And she looked at me and she said, no, you don't understand. I never wanted kids before you and I met. I want your children. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So I said to her, I'm not ready, maybe just give me some time to rest and see how it shakes down. And so one morning she comes out of the bathroom with a very odd, freaked out look on her face. And I'm like, what's going on? She holds up a pregnancy test. She says, I'm pregnant. And the other thing is...
That's when shit got real.
Well, the thing that I've missed out is that Penny said, look, Penny's intuition was, and she'd never said this to me before, and, I've had an open relationship with my wife now for 22 years, so she said, I need you to be very careful because if Angie gets pregnant, I don't know if I can stay. She goes, I don't think I'm ready to deal with a child. And Penny got her tubes tied when we first got married because she didn't want to be a mother. So she made that clear, and she went to the hospital and got tied so she couldn't have a child. So as soon as Angie said I'm pregnant, I'm like, oh my God, this could be devastating. So one thing led to another. We talked about it, and Penny said, we had done a 3-way ceremony where we all made our own vows to each other. So Penny to Angie, Penny to me to Penny, me to Angie, Angie to Penny, Angie to Paul. Because we wanted this to be sacred to us. We didn't care about, other people's opinions. That's never a good way to live, especially if it's your mom and dad. That'll always mean you're still a child. But Penny said, okay, I'll hang in as long as I can. Okay, so that's the beginning of the story. So then what happened is Angie and I, she's a real shaman. She did a 3-year training with Michael Harner, and she's an advanced trained shaman, not a kind of fluffy shaman. She's highly trained. And her and I did a lot of medicine ceremonies and drumming and rattling, and we do a lot of painting together, and we would do a lot of meditation and chanting in the sauna for long periods of time, and we were vaporizing a lot of tobacco and things like that. And so she didn't realize she was pregnant during this whole time until she started feeling off and something was unusual, and she just had this weird sensation she was pregnant. So she tested, and sure enough. So what happened is during the period up until the time she did the pregnancy test, we were doing a lot of ceremonies and a lot of medicines and a lot of...
Why so many ceremonies leading up?
It's just part of my healing when I went through my midlife crisis is I would do a ceremony every weekend, and I would usually fast the day and do medicine work, and I have a system that I developed for preparing myself, and I had a lot of pain I had to heal, and I found that the different medicines were very helpful, like mushrooms can be very, very helpful, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I also still had a lot of pain from when my brother committed suicide, which I thought I'd healed, but I hadn't, and Angie helped me heal that. And so it was just me going through my healing, and it was her supporting me in that process and also getting a lot out of it herself. But the thing that happened is she ended up having a miscarriage. And so that was very traumatic for her too, right? And so, I was like, whoo, I got to be careful.
Dodged a bullet.
I was like, how do I get through this? Because if I express myself to her that I'm happy, then I'm in trouble because she's really unhappy. Penny was sad for Angie, but like me, relieved because, it's like, okay, we don't have to be parents again right now, and in other words, it was kind of one of those paradoxical moments where there was the sadness because of course that male part of me wants to know what my child with this beautiful woman Angie was going to be like. And so we worked through it. Well, then she ended up getting pregnant again, and she had what's called a chemical pregnancy, which I'd never heard of before, but basically it's she thought she was pregnant, and she had all the symptoms of being pregnant, and she even passed a pregnancy test. And then she had a miscarriage again. But I can't remember the details of what a chemical pregnancy is. She explained it all to me at the time. But then she went through sort of the miscarriage experience again. And I'm monitoring Angie's cycle very carefully, her menstrual cycle. And I've studied it. And so I'm really being careful not to ejaculate inside of her when she is fertile. And she's giving me feedback. And I can tell, too, because there's a change in the thickness of the mucus and there's change in their body temperature. There's ways you can tell. So after the second time, I'm like, what is going on? And so I got even more diligent and more careful. Well, lo and behold, she gets pregnant again. So this is like the third time that we're going through this. And I finally said, Angie, something's going on. There is a soul that wants to be our child that refuses to take a no. Mm-hmm. I am like, unless you're tricking me on when you're cycling. She goes, I would never do that. And then there's a soul that really wants to be our child. So I said, I'm going to set up a ceremony, and you and I are going to get together, and I'm going to do, and I can do this without medicines easily, but I find that particularly when I'm on mushrooms, it makes the channel more open, and it enhances my clairvoyance, so it's a aid. I just find it helpful. It's kind of like, just like low dose LSD can really enhance cognition, right? There's a reason Francis Crick was on LSD when he discovered the DNA helix, right? And so I did a proper shamanic ceremony with the intention, and I did my pre-journey art and my prayers and everything to go meet this soul. So once I got into the journey, finished the entry ceremonies, I said to my soul, please connect me to the soul of our new child. And my soul knew, because she's part of my thinking process. I said, I need to know why this soul wants to be our child. Now, Angie and I had just recently done, every year we do a New Year's mandala. So we paint a mandala, and we go into meditation, and we wait for visions, and we do rattling and drumming and a variety of practices to get the vision for our year. So it's quite a process that we do every year. And Angie painted this beautiful tree. And while she was painting this, it was very unusual for her to paint a tree as a New Year's mandala. Like, usually there's something that symbolizes, like my New Year's mandala for 2019 is my Living 4D with Paul Chek logo in a circle, and the circle bursts like the sun, and then there's keywords like wellness, balance, love, the names of key family members, and things that hold my intention for the year. That's more classic, but for some reason she'd had this very powerful download of this tree, and she painted these beautiful roots, and the tree had gold in it, and it had beautiful little white flowers all over it, kind of like a cherry tree when it buds.
Did it look kind of like a tree of life in some way?
Well, you could say that, but that wasn't really,
that wasn't the focus.
You'll see in a minute when I get there. I'm setting you up for the real mind blower. Yeah. So she painted this beautiful tree, right? And we're in this ceremony, and I connected to the soul, and she was a little, probably about 75, 77-year-old woman, and she was from Taiwan, if I remember right, Taiwan. And when I met her, she was in a rocking chair in a grass hut with a dirt floor. And first thing I said to her is, what is your name? And she said, my name is Bahuan. And I said, oh, nice to meet you, Bahuan. I said, why is it that you want to be our child so bad? And she was holding a cup of tea, a little kind of Asian small cup, like Chinese.
Just like a ceremonial teacup.
Like a ceremonial teacup. And she's rocking in her chair, and she says, every day I drink my tea and I meditate and I go and I watch the world. I look and see. And she said, Paul, and then she began to give me visions, and she showed me that her whole family had been shot and killed by a communist regime, and that she was forced to farm their farmlands, that was the family's farmlands, pretty much by herself, and that they had to give everything they raised to the government, and they just got to keep enough to survive off of, kind of like the way the Chinese took over the Tibetans. And and she said, I've been watching you for a long time. She says, I agree with everything you teach. And she said, I've chosen you as my parents because it's time for me to come back to the world and help. She said, there are big changes coming in the earth.
Yeah.
And she says, I can drink tea from anywhere in the world, and just by the taste I can tell you exactly what is missing in the soil, what minerals or what nutrients. She says, I can tell you what's in the plant, what healing properties it has. She says, I'm an expert at the earth and the water and plants. I've spent my whole lifetime and many lifetimes as a farmer. And she says, I have skills that are going to be needed on earth. And I've chosen you and Penny and Angie to remind me of my knowledge and to remind me why I'm here, so that when the time comes, my knowledge will be reactivated.
I just got chills from this.
Oh, it gets much better.
And it was Thailand, not Thailand. Taiwan or Thailand?
It was Thailand. Taiwan.
Taiwan. Okay, because I was in Thailand. So when you wrote me the email, you were thinking of a different place.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, still Asia.
I get it mixed up. It was Taiwan.
Taiwan, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did you feel in that moment when that happened?
Oh, it gets better. Wait around for a minute. So and then she says, and I want to fly. I want to fly in an airplane. Well, Penny's a pilot. And she knew that. She goes,
cool.
She says, I see Penny flying. I want to fly. And she said, I want to learn to ski. And Penny's a ski instructor. And she was, I think she said, I want to go to Disneyland. She knew of all these things that she'd never gotten to do. And so she was telling us all these things, but she really wanted to learn what I teach at the Institute in holistic lifestyle coaching. And she was saying that she really loves my philosophy of spirituality and, kind of a non-religious but deeply spiritual approach. So she was just going through all these things, and it was very emotional for me because now I realized why she kept getting pregnant. This was something bigger than myself. I was being called by this soul to be a guide, an emissary, to bring her back into the world to do world work. And I was chosen, and Angie and Penny were chosen because we had exactly the right skill set to fulfill her needs to contribute to the world, but also to fulfill her own desires to express herself, because she had lived many lifetimes of hardship where she didn't get to do a lot of the things that in the afterlife she's watching people do and wishes she could do that. So here's where it gets interesting. I said, after the ceremony was over, I said to Angie, I said, use your phone or your computer and go on one of those Google translators and see what Bahwan means. So she does, and I'm standing right there, and it pops up. The translation is white flower, and then it showed an image of the exact tree that Angie painted for her New Year's mandala, to the frickin' letter. Same colors, same flowers. It was as though Angie had downloaded it and painted it so perfectly. It was like Angie's painting was a photograph. And then we clicked on the link with the tree, and it said Taiwan National Flower. The white flower, the National White Flower Festival, and it ended the day that I was doing the ceremony. It was a 3-day national ceremony, and the very day I did the ceremony was day 3 of the yearly ceremony for the white flower tree, and that's what Angie had painted. And we're like, wow, this is powerful as hell. And Angie was saying while she was painting, I don't know why I'm painting this, but it's just showing up so strong inside of me that I just have to paint it. And so the other thing that I didn't want to look at, but my previous assistant, Vidya McNeil, is a very skilled artist and very good at art therapy. She kept seeing that there was babies coming into my life. She said, I see 2 children coming into your life. And I'm like, no. In fact, one time I even tried to change a painting because I didn't want that. I'm like, I don't see that. And so Vidya was actually seeing this because there was a time that I was in a relationship with Vidya as well. And Angie and I were, and Penny were co-relating. And so the profundity, the profound experience of this was just mind-boggling. And then I continued, and I still do to this day, converse with White Flower and talk to her, and sometimes when Mana, is unruly. And I thought, because this is another mistake I made, because all my conversations with White Flower were with a woman, I inherently assumed that she was coming back as a woman. So and I was, talking to this little baby in the womb, thinking it was a girl, and thought, I'm going to have a girl, and I was all excited. So then we go for our 20-week ultrasound, and the lady says, you have a little boy. And I said, are you sure? She said, well, that's a penis.
I just talked to a lady in a chair. Are you sure?
And she goes, that's a penis. And she goes, and it's a good size one, too. Like, yeah.
Attaboy.
He had a good boy. And so then once I found out it was a girl, I felt mystified. I'm like, how in the world did I screw it up? So I went back to White Flower and I said, I thought you were going to be a girl. She says, oh no, that's much too tough a life. She says, I'm going to be a guy this time. It's much easier. I said, I get it.
Oh my gosh. This is, to me, like hearing your story, it talks about the fractals we experience ourselves in.
Yeah.
Your story, having Angie paint the exact tree, what the hell? The odds of these things happening. And it's a testament to the work you've done. How many years have you actually been doing spirit medicine? Like going into these realms, learning, and then honestly, going from the 4 and 5D, bringing those lessons back here to the 3D?
Well, I was indoctrinated into the concepts of meditation and the practice of meditation when I was 12 through the Self-Realization Fellowship. And I used to get into some pretty damn deep meditations even as a kid.
Now tell me, the original Chek Center was on Vulcan.
Yeah.
I still see the sign up there.
Yeah, because a couple of our previous instructors, our first 2 instructors, still have their studio there.
Yes, which is walking right to SRF.
Yes, and so that was one of the neat things because I was close to the meditation gardens. And then when I was 15, I went to summer camp for the summer with the Self-Realization Fellowship monks at the Lake Shrine Center in Los Angeles. And their headquarters is a place called Mount Washington in Los Angeles. So I spent the summer with the monks going deeper and learning. And I was able to get a lot of great training and a lot of healing from the Christian concepts that as a child can be very disheartening and scary. And so I had to kind of clear a lot of that confusion out of me because it used to frustrate me and I couldn't get questions answered, but the monks were just amazing. They were so grounded and so peaceful and so beautiful, and I felt so safe with them. It was the opposite of this hell and damnation kind of, well, it all has a function, but it served its function in me, and the function was I needed to get it healed, and thank God for my mother finding a place to do that.
And she was a yogi for most of her life.
She followed Self-Realization Fellowship teachings and devoted herself to at least an hour a day of meditation for 24 years before she began exploring all other philosophies. But she ultimately came back to SRF after several years of exploring others because she just felt like Yogananda's teachings were the creme de la creme for her.
Do you remember your very first medicine experience, what that was like?
Well, my first medicine experience, so what I was saying is that I had done a lot of meditation, and then even prior to the use of medicines, I was doing some research actually in the field of martial arts, and I have a 3-volume set that's like a documentation of some of the greatest martial arts teachers in the world and their spiritual orientations, and it listed the lineage of ancient masters of Tai Chi, and lo and behold, there was one that was still alive, and he lived in San Francisco, and his name was Fong Ha. And I went, holy smokes, there is an actual bona fide recognized master, not just a guy who's good at it who got some training over there, or someone who moved over here that used to do a bunch of, there's all sorts of stuff out there. But the real deal. So I did some research and tracked this guy down, and I gave him a phone call and said, look, I'm writing a book, and I really feel that even standard approaches to Tai Chi are problematic because it takes a couple of years before people stop thinking about their form. And I've done a lot of work with people and they still can't get out of their heads. Would you be willing, could I hire you to teach me? Because I need someone to guide me into a deep inner experience of Tai Chi. He was also a Qigong master. I'd studied medical Qigong as well and did a certification course in that. So I had practiced a lot of that, which I found was very good. So when I went and saw Fong Ha, he gave me my first gong practice. I stayed with him through 3 gongs, and then I felt, which is 3 100-day practices, and then I got open so much. I mean, it was just so powerful and so beautiful, and my intuition and my clairvoyance came on really strong. I mean, I've always been clairvoyant since I was a kid, but it just got really strong to the point where, you can verify this with Penny and Angie, she would give me gifts for Christmas or something, and I can just hold the box up to my third eye and tell you exactly what's in it because I can see right through it. And I'm also a remote viewer, and I won a remote viewing contest with 750 people in it, taught by the CIA's remote viewing director.
What is a remote viewing?
A remote viewer is someone who can actually take their consciousness out of their body and go anywhere in the known universe or the world and actually identify. So in the military, they use them to find Russian submarines or things like that. And that skill came on when I was 12. I started having out-of-body experiences, and I learned that I could control it. And I started testing myself to see if I was just having hallucinations or was it real. So I would travel around. We had a 140-acre farm, and my father would leave tools all over the place, and so I would actually travel around, and I would say, okay, over behind the barn there's an axe and a McCullough chainsaw, and then in the morning I'd get up to go check, and sure enough it was there. And so I would start practicing and going and looking for like key things that I could identify, that I could then verify, that I didn't know before.
So you were proving it to yourself.
I had to prove it to
identity
myself.
Was working.
Yes, that I wasn't just cracking up.
Am I crazy or is this real?
Well, I lived in a very, very stressful home environment. My father, I think I talked to you about this before, was a very brutal man.
Yes.
And
you worked many jobs, like in tandem of you understanding these powers and these concepts, you had to still deal with life's responsibilities. Like shit was real.
Yeah, no, very real. And my father was not a man you say anything to except, yes, sir, unless you want to have your teeth for lunch.
Yeah.
Or worse. And so the pressure of seeing all of us getting beat up and my mother getting slapped around and just the parents fighting over money, I just wanted to die, really. I just didn't know. I used to just get so upset at God and say, why am I here? This is not, I didn't come here for this, So that's a whole other story. But the point is that I'd had a lot of these experiences. And so by the time I got to Fong Ha, I had already been through training with monks. I'd already spent a lot of time meditating, but I knew I needed to go deeper. And I knew that when I wrote my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I had to figure out, I knew in my heart and soul that part of my function on this planet was to create a concept to help people balance working out. But I knew people in our culture have a hard time meditating as it's traditionally done because they're too, their heads are like buzz bombs. And so that process not only took me very deep into myself, but it gave me exactly what I was looking for so I could develop the concept of working in, which is really something that I pioneered. Now, there's lots of that kind of stuff in Asian and foreign cultures. It's not called working in. It's called, Tai Chi or spiritual practice or, Chinese medicine or various other elements of it. But I needed to juxtapose our ass kicker concept with something that was healing, something that was parasympathetic dominant, not sympathetic dominant. So I went through the training with Fong Ha, and then I got to the point where I had what I needed and I could use that. And really, at that point, it was just a matter of practicing, right? Sure, he could give me more techniques, but I didn't need more techniques. I needed to drill into the ones that I had because any one of them can take you all the way. And so then I began working with my soul to figure out, well, how can I create a class of movements that correlate to imbalances in the psychophysical structure of the chakra system, so I can organize a way that someone can do my questionnaire and identify, okay, you've got high inflammation in your small intestine, therefore you're going to need to do the work-in exercises to bring cooling and healing energy through the third chakra. So I took my training with Phong Ha and my inner experiences, and then I mapped out, using my knowledge of the glandular system, the vascular system, the nervous system, the arteriovascular tree, basically, and how it's distributed through the body. And so I used the physiology of the chakra system to create movements coupled with breathing and emptying the mind to bring blood flow and conscious healing energy into these key areas. But I was using the basic principles that Tai Chi was built on, and I read many books on the history of Tai Chi and Qigong and the masters, and I got down to the kind of nuts and bolts basics of what Tai Chi was really all about. So I had the academic understanding, I had the experience of it, and so I had been doing the Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation practices, and what I did is I normally didn't do both on the same day because there just wasn't enough hours in a day. When I started with Phong Ha, I committed to a 1 hour practice every day, and a gong is 100 days straight, and if you miss a day, you have to start over from 1. So I was very diligent not to miss any days. And so I did 3 100-day practices in 3 different techniques that he taught me. And then on the third technique, I kept going, and I think I did multiple, maybe 3 gongs. It's been a long time now. That was around 2000, 2001. And so that was part of my research. So it was 2006 when I had my first introduction to psychedelic medicines other than marijuana, which I'd experienced a number of times as a kid. It was my kind of play toy. Everyone else liked alcohol. I didn't like alcohol at all. I liked pot. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, I was working with Danny Way quite a lot, and him and his brother had gone to this doctor that uses psychedelic medicines in his healing work, and they'd done a DMT ceremony with him, and it just completely just blew Danny's mind in a very beautiful way, and helped him have a much deeper understanding of what God was, and helped him reconcile a lot of his own pain. And he just got a hold of me, and I think he texted me and said, I got to talk to you. And so he got a hold of me and said, you've got to go try this. He says, you know, I know this is probably not really the kind of stuff you're into, but trust me, this is really mind-blowing. And his brother Damon, who had also rehabilitated from a bad brain injury, said, Paul, you got to do this. So I said, well, you know, these are 2 guys that I trust, and I've spent a lot of time with these guys. Yeah. So I took Penny and a few others I won't mention because some of them are famous, and I don't know if they want to be mentioned. But we went down for our first ceremony, and that was before the days of vaporizer. So this is, you know, straight DMT out of a glass pipe and full hit. And man, I had an unbelievable union with God. I mean, it just, I had a full on, you know, 2-0, 1 with, and I must have cried 5 gallons. It was so powerful.
I mean, this is like a huge inflection point for you, because the Institute probably took a massive turn towards different varieties of education.
Not really.
From that moment.
No. All it did was confirm that I was on the right path.
So it
was a major confirmation.
Yeah.
No, there was no zigzag except for people's opinions about me using psychedelics, which, you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, they attack me for Swiss balls. They attack me for the way I dress. They attack me for going vegetarian. I mean, I get attacked all the time, so I'm kind of used to the flies buzzing, you know. But you know, as Einstein said, great minds always meet violent opposition from mediocre minds, and that's just a fact. And I'm not trying to brag, but I think my resume speaks for itself. So the experience was so profound. The first thing that happened when I opened my eyes is I said, can I do that again? And there was like 8 of us, and we were doing a circle ceremony. And he said, well, yeah, as soon as these people are done. Now, right that night, I watched several people have a very hard time. And what I realized right there in my first ceremony, it was because of all the Tai Chi and the meditation and the spiritual training and the work on managing my own mind that I was able to pierce the veil on my first try. But I saw lots of things happen, some of them scary, right? And so what I did was I said to this guy, I said, look, I'm willing to pay you if you will train me on how to use these medicines, because I knew that there was a lot of people I work with that could be really helped. And so he said he knew who I was because I had been working with Danny at the same time as him. So he was the chiropractor doing his stuff on one side. I was doing the therapy that I do. And normally I'm kind of suspicious of that because oftentimes what other doctors and therapists are doing are screwing up what I'm doing. So whenever I take someone on like that, I make them agree that I'm the case manager. So it all gets filtered through me, or I end up having to deal with nightmares. Mm-hmm. And I've always done it that way because I've had so many of those nightmares. But the one thing I noticed is that every time Danny came to see me after seeing this guy, his body was working better, not worse. So I said, whatever this guy's doing, it's working and it's not conflicting with anything I'm doing. He knew who I was and he said, yes. He says, I don't normally do that, but for you I will. In fact, he was having some body problems and he said, I'll tell you what, if you work on me every weekend, because he knew I travel up that you're in town, then after you work on me, I will do a ceremony for you and I'll train you in the use of the different medicines. So for 1 year exactly, I think we did about 40 to 40, maybe 42 journeys on a wide variety of different medicines, all at very high doses. He's a high dose guy. He's like, knock the ego out of the ballpark. Mm-hmm. And so I did several different variations of DMT, and I did various versions of LSD, and I did San Pedro, and I did mescaline, and I did different types of mushrooms. We did all sorts of stuff. So I really got an exposure. And while we were doing that, I was attending his ceremonies as an assistant to him. So I saw a lot of the struggles people went through, and I actually learned a lot of the things that he did that I thought was not how I would like it done. And so I really got to see a lot of trouble and a lot of the ways that people weren't being qualified for dose. There was no preparation. It was just his whole philosophy is your karma is to be here. This is the dose. Go. Whatever happens, happens. And that's kind of based in Eastern concepts. I understand that approach, but it just is dangerous for me, and I couldn't buy into it, which was perfect because it led me to developing an entire system for preparing people, processing them, doing post-journey integration, how I manage them in the ceremony, and I've never had anybody get hurt at all. Mm-hmm. But I've had a lot of people come to me from all over the world very broken. Yep. So the point I'm driving at here is that all that came together, and I continued doing my Tai Chi, Qigong, and meditations through all this. So that was 2006. Then I got my Medicine Man Spirit Guide license through the Native American Council because the first thing Penny said, you're going to need to get some kind of legitimate...
Is that a pretty serious process to get the card?
No, it's not at all. They have a course of training that you have to do, but basically you can do it at your own pace. In their system, once you sign up, you get your license, but you're responsible to continue the training and finish it on your own. But what I did is I called the chief of the organization, a man named Cloudpiler, and I gave him links to my websites and access to a lot of the stuff I did. And he said, Paul, the work you've done is just way beyond what we teach anyhow. He said, it's just a waste of your time to go through this program. In fact, he asked me if he could have access to my program for his people. So I was going to set up a discount rate for all the members of this organization, the Native American Council, so they could study my PPS Success Mastery Program and things like that. So basically I got grandfathered in, but it gave me a legitimate federal license to use any natural medicine as long as I do it in accordance with the Native American ceremonial process.
And it can be anywhere because that's where your guidelines exist, is through the card. It can be anywhere as long as it's in a safe space. It doesn't have to be on Native American land.
No. It can be anywhere. It's a federal license, so it's anywhere in the United States. I can't. That won't protect me in England or somewhere like that. Right. And there's a whole story as to how that whole system got built. But basically, the guy that founded it used to be a naturopathic physician that got put in jail because he was healing too many people of cancer naturally. But the judge that tried his court case realized what was really going on, but had to put him away because the laws required it. But the judge actually saw he was doing a lot of good. So the judge actually came to him and said, I'm paraphrasing, but the judge said, I'm going to put you in a prison that needs your help. And what I'm going to do is support you. You go to the prison and work as a doctor in the prison for the 4 years that you're in there or whatever. And what I will do when you get out, I will show you how to create legislation to create a body so that people can do what you do and can practice and use medicines legally because you're in accordance. And he's a Native American Indian, this guy. In accordance with law. So the judge had empathy for him and then helped him set up the Native American Council so that he could conduct healing ceremonies without being illegal. But he couldn't do it, you see, as a naturopathic physician, the way he was doing it, because there's no structure for that in medicine.
Yes.
Right?
We live in a crazy time because there's so many people doing medicine.
Yeah.
But yet, there's also the danger of people doing medicine and having them take a very wrong path.
Oh my God, it's
right?
so much there.
People's
That could be
and
14
like
podcasts.
Just in that its own.
I wouldn't doubt if I've now counseled and worked with at least 30 people that have had their lives turned inside out by poorly run medicine ceremonies and not knowing what they're taking.
Well, let's talk about that because it's not for everyone. This is a very sacred, unique plant that has tremendous power, of which people are still understanding. You're still a student of the plants.
You're always a student. The day you're not a student,
mastery.
the day that you're not a student is the day that you're going to, meet your shadow in glaring form, but you'll call it Satan or something else.
Well, and I love this because I wanted to know, and thank you for sharing all this about your history with this richness of the medicine. Like, I knew a little bit of your story there, but seeing the connection to the woman in Taiwan, and then your training in Qigong, and then the SRF, and now here we are, 2019. How do you see this unfolding into the curriculum with the Chek Institute in the future? We are going to talk about your 4 doctors, which I want to dig into, but how is that going to unfold now?
Well, I can't put that into the curriculum, really. The only thing that I can do is if I do a ceremony at Rhythmia or a place like that would agree to let me do that. But when I do these ceremonies, there's a lot of preparation. For example, I don't think Mike would mind me sharing this. I wouldn't take Mike into a ceremonial process for 2.5 years because I felt Mike needed the training in mental, emotional self-management and mastering 4-doctor basics and learning how to manage his own emotions and his mind more effectively before I took him into a ceremony. Because if a person doesn't have any mental, emotional self-management skills, then a medicine ceremony can be a real ball buster. And depending on the dose and the environment, a person can literally, to put it in a cliche term, crack up. They can lose their sense of who they are. Exactly. They can become ultimately schizophrenic. They can have multiple personality disorders. And I could give you all the technical lingo, but that's not important. Just basically, it fractures the soul. The person, when I use my clairvoyance and look into the fields of people that have had these kinds of problems, which you and I are familiar with, it looks very similar to if you took a rock and threw it at the mirror in the bathroom, how it would just fracture into pieces and pieces would fall out and there'd be black holes where the back of the mirror is showing through and there's no glass. So it's as though, if you imagine the soul as a circle within which is this beautiful mirror, and all of a sudden someone hit it with a hammer. The medicine experiences is so strong for some people, and it brings up so much of their unconscious. And because of, especially when you have Christian or traditional Abrahamic religious programming, where you have all this polarity in you about God and the devil, and then you all of a sudden are in a medicine ceremony and you're coming face to face with the fact that maybe you'd been sexually abused and you didn't realize it, or you'd been a sexual abuser of somebody else, or if you'd abused people violently, or you went against the 10 Commandments and you were sure you were going to burn in hell. Well, you can't tell the difference between a thought and reality when you're deep on a medicine. So you actually live the experience. So if a person does not know how to manage that, and someone hasn't processed them to see how much stuff there is hiding down there in the unconscious, then going to a medicine ceremony is really taking the lid off of Pandora's box. And what I see going on is tons of ceremonies with no effective preparation, no flight training. I call that flight training, learning how to manage yourself in the journey, and no post-journey integration. And people going from one dose to more. I mean, I've had people come to me that have started off with 2 days of ayahuasca, added a third day of ayahuasca, and then put LSD in the mix. And then by the third or fourth day, they're bringing out the DMT. So now they're doing ayahuasca, LSD, and DMT together. And LSD and ayahuasca...
I mean, it just sounds like a drug party.
Well, the thing is they're going in opposite directions energetically. So you got one drug that's totally yang and lifting you up out of yourself, and then you got ayahuasca that's very yin and pulling you back into yourself. So the next thing you know, you have this kind of chemical war going on inside of you, and that mirrors itself in your psyche. So people get it's like, drinking Drano, and it just guts you.